Hey family, welcome back. Thanks so much for visiting. So today I'm going to brush on Abraham, Joseph, and the Israelites. The purpose of this video is for those who come from a family that doesn't believe in God or comes from false religion, organized religion, shaman, Buddhists, anyone that believes in ancestors, black magic, white magic, witchcraft, Catholicism, and Santeria. You know, anything that's not aligned with God, that's not correct with God, and that how you can be the one to break it for your family and save the future generations. So we're going to start with Abraham. Now, Abraham was led from the land of Ur, which they were pagan worshippers. They were very selfish, wicked people. So God moved him from the land of Ur to Canaan. And God had promised that that would be for his people, where they will multiply. Canaan was a great location because it was a land bridge between three other continents, Africa, Europe, and Asia. So, and it also had very fertile soil, so they can grow there, multiply there, and spread from there. So we have Joseph. He came from the 12 brothers who belonged to Jacob. Remember, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob had the 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. So Joseph got sold into slavery by his brothers because they were super jealous of them because he loved Joseph the most. Joseph, being sold, eventually led him to Egypt. Okay? He was able to decipher the Pharaoh's dream. And he was able to save all the surrounding countries from a famine. He was the only one that saw that this famine was coming. And they were able to save for 7 years and went through the famine of 7 years. So Jacob, Joseph's dad, and all their brothers, they were already living also in Canaan. But they heard that the Pharaoh had corn, so he sent his sons to go and buy corn. And the family gets reunited. So Jacob, the whole family, they all move, and the other Israelites, well, at that time Hebrews, they all moved to Egypt. So now this is how they get into Egypt. They grew there. They multiplied by the millions. The new Pharaoh comes in. The Pharaoh that loved Joseph, he dies. New Pharaoh comes in. He doesn't know who Joseph is, and he doesn't care. He just knows that there's too many of them. And he's afraid that they're going to overpower them and join their allies. Okay? Join their enemies. So he goes and turns all of them into slaves to build for them. And he suppresses them and makes life so hard for them so that they don't grow. But guess what? Even in the slavery, they continue to multiply. So by the time, so while they were living there, they were slaves for 400 years. So they were now used to, because they didn't know God at the time, they were used to the Egyptian gods, Egyptian worshiping. They believed in so many gods, and all their gods, most of them were half animals and half human. And we know from the Nephilim story, from the fallen angels, from Enoch, that that is demonic and it's evil and it's corrupted and it's perverted. But that's who they believed in. So they also believed that there was a Hathor. Hathor was a love goddess. She was a half cow, half female. So now here we have Moses. Now he comes to tell them there's a guy named God. And he created all of this, and he loves you guys, and we're supposed to leave Egypt. So he had to leave 2 million people out of Egypt. And now here they are in the wilderness. And when he went up to Mount Sinai, and he was there for 40 days, the Israelites that were like, hey, we need a God, a tangible God, something that we can see and worship. Because, you know, God did not appear to everybody. And no one could go to him and talk to him except for a priest or prophet. So what did they do? They melted all their gold and created a golden cow. And so they worshipped it because that's all they knew for 400 years. They grew up in it, in idol worshiping, and they died in idol worshiping. So that's why it was so hard for the Israelites. And we see in the Old Testament that sometimes they were good and they believed in God and they prospered, but once they prospered, they would go back to idol worshiping. And then they were destroyed. So if Joseph never went into Egypt as a slave, the Israelites or Hebrews probably would never have been slaves to the Egyptians. But they would have all died. Everybody would have died in that famine. And you know who else would have died? Judah, Joseph's brother Judah. Who came from the bloodline of Judah? Jesus. they would have died. Who also came from the bloodline of, the 12 brothers? The Levites. Levi and Judah were brothers to Joseph's first wife, Leah. He did not love her. He loved her sister, Rachel. But God honored her as being the first wife. This is for those who want to marry multiple wives. God did not honor any of them the way that he honored Judah's bloodline and the Levite bloodline, because the Aaronic bloodline came from Levi's bloodline. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you come from a long line of non-believers. I come from Catholic and half shaman. My mom was Catholic and shaman. She went to church every Sunday, wore her rosary all the time faithfully, prayed all the time. And even though we were poor, she still paid her tithing faithfully every Sunday. And she didn't understand a single word of English, but she still went. But when her sickness got too bad, she would go to a shaman to heal her. So we know in the Bible, God says, do not go to spirits, medium, psychics, sorcerers, none, witchcraft at all for healing. Come to just me. So because of her dabbling in shamanism, and my dad did too, all my family, Hmong people, most of them are, we inherited generational curses, generational demons and spirits. I had to battle them. And it wasn't until God saved me 2 years ago that I was able to cut them off from my bloodline so it does not transfer to my children. I had to fight a lot of demons in me that we go and say, oh, this is just my personality. God does not create personalities to be corrupted, evil, lying, cheating, angry, depressed, sadness, anxiety. Those are not your personality. It might have come from through the bloodline because of what your family, your forefathers did. You know, Joseph, if he slept with Potiphar's wife, he would have continued that generational curse of what his dad, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and them did, fornicated. But he didn't. And even though he got locked up, look what God did. Made him second in command over Egypt and saved everybody. But even though they became slaves, look what God did. God took them from Egypt back to Canaan, back to where Abraham started, where Abraham was. And you know, the Israelites were only supposed to be in that trek for 11 days. Okay, from Egypt to Canaan. It was only supposed to be 11 days, but it took 40 years because they kept complaining and they kept going back to idol worshiping. Every time they went to idol worshiping, enemies came and God allowed them to get attacked. So if you're under attack, there's a reason why. Ask God, what is it that I need to change or break in my family bloodline? And then when they prospered, and they prospered when they believed in God. But when they prospered, they forgot about God. So you got to stay humble. You know, the 12 tribes were split after Solomon. 10 of them went up north to create the northern kingdom of Israel, and 2 went down south to create the southern kingdom of Judah. But they eventually, both kingdoms went back to idol worshiping, and then God allowed them to go ahead and come under control of their enemies. And they were never together again after that. And that's why Israel today is where Canaan was. That's why Israel is surrounded by all their enemies. They at one point were family, came from the same bloodlines. So you might not be the popular one. I never fit in. I was never the popular one. I'm still not, especially now that I'm following Jesus so closely and I'm on fire. Yeah, people don't like you. You will create enemies in your family, but you also will save a few of them and save the future generations and have them come from a bloodline of believers of Jesus. Don't be afraid to stand out. Don't be afraid to be hated. Rather be hated by man than hated by God. You are going to do so many things for your children and the generations after that by being the one that breaks the generational curses and that finally truly believes in the right God and the right Jesus. Don't be afraid. If you've always felt different, it's because God has called you to stand out and leave that bloodline and enter into his bloodline, into his royal household, and inherit his kingdom. I know it's all possible. Until next time, God bless. Bye-bye.